Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here, and I'm looking at Volume 2 of Anonymous Noise, Story and Art by Ryoko Fukuyama. I reviewed Volume 1, and my title for that was that Anonymous Noise has crashed MarmadukeFan.exe because it was so weird and so goofy, and yet I still kind of oddly liked it. And I think I rambled a bit, but my basic point was that SJW Marvel and SJWs in general take the wrong lesson out of manga. They see the silly billiness of it, they see the cutesy faces of it, and they think that's what gives manga its appeal. And that's mixing up characteristics of manga with the nature of manga. So a characteristic is something that most humans have. Most humans have 10 fingers. So having 10 fingers is a characteristic of humans, but you could be born with more than 10 fingers, or you could lose a finger, like some of our boys on Twitter. And oh boy, that's a spicy joke. But anyway, having 10 fingers isn't definitional to what a human being is. So manga, because it's an entire country, even though you can find traits that are similar across numerous manga, like you could talk about the diagonal panels and maybe some of the Japanese cultural humor dating back to kabuki theater, you can also find a lot of variety within manga. And I think like the girly genres versus the young boy genres versus the horror genres, that illustrates that. So looking at Anonymous Noise, this is for a shoujo audience. This is for like an audience of little girls, but this illustrates something that Volume 1 also illustrated, but I think that looking at a couple things in this might make the point even better. So I think that manga is going to functionally replace what the Western superhero comic market has been, because they're so good at offering what the phantom obvious that SJW Marvel wants to get, manga already has. So if you try to make superhero comics appeal to, teeny bopper millennials, well, the problem is there are already really good teeny bopper pop culture J-pop comics that have all of like the silly things that people like when they're that age, but it delivers it in a non-condescending package. So a little bit of this that I was looking at was, I love Ryoko's editorial comments on her work, and given how long she's been in the industry, she's probably middle-aged at least, but she's a genuinely quirky person. She's not a person pretending to be quirky because, tee-hee, I'm so silly, all right? I've got like a Mario purse from Gucci Couture, and it's got like the Mario anime on it. And she seems like Ryoko seems like a genuinely quirky and enthusiastic person, because she communicates her opinions and she communicates her gratitude for the reception of her manga. So this is a little bit where she's explaining about a drama CD being produced, where they got these Japanese voice actors to read lines of dialogue and sing songs as her characters. And then she like praises each of the actors, and she has some like, spicy grandma comments that she adds to it. And she comes... Part of this might be her, playing a character a little bit in her own work, but one of the reasons it works is that she is so consistently enthusiastic about her own work and anyone who appreciates her own work. So she's not like your silly Billy auntie. She's like your aunt who's kind of cool and kind of nuts, but also really, really talented. Right. And so I think that people try to imitate this. They try to take on the, I don't know, like the persona of being a goofball, but they don't really commit to it. There we go. It's committing to the bit. So, and this also illustrates just how good this industry is at being the pop culture. So for the Western comics industry to be the equivalent of this, we not only had to have like a really successful superhero comics industry. Imagine if all the teeny bopper pop idol stars were singing songs dressed up as superheroes. Be quiet, cat. He loves to caterwaul. Anyway, I feed him and I take care of his litter. It doesn't work. So, good grief. This is worse than Luna sucking her paws on an Our Boy Zach video. Anyway, I completely lost my train of thought. Okay, imagine if the pop music stars all sang like Marvel Comics characters and played the parts of Marvel Comics characters. And then imagine the animation industry was constantly cranking out a new cartoon for every new hit character that Marvel Comics produced. And you'd have an idea of the gap between what the manga industry is for Japan and how meager and what a shell of its former self the Western superhero market is now. And maybe one reason for that is that superheroes are, brightly colorful people, in tight outfits, smashing into each other and breaking stuff. They started out as like a young boys fantasy series, and then manga covers a broader territory. They've got like the young boys manga where they're all beating each other up with like superpowers, and every shoujo it'll be like, oh, they're wizards, oh, they're pirates, oh, they're ninjas, but they're all superhero power people beating each other up. And then they'll have like another genre that's all about like teeny bopper romance and magical pop star bands and mixing up all those kinds of fairy magical music things. And then they'll have like horror comics. I think that manga has just successfully tapped into more markets than the big two ever could. Now, we do have a vibrant independent scene in Western comics. You can find horror comics, you can find zombie comics, you can find, serious comics that are trying to be like serious literature, but the manga has not just provided a model of like packaging comics, in like these black and white thicker formats, and they've successfully been able to make comics into pop culture fairly consistently. And that's an aspect of their industry where I think it comes from their enthusiasm for the craft and their willingness to give their audiences what they want. If you think that comics is a cerebral art form and that the customers don't matter, of course customers matter to the manga industry. So much of what is produced is determined by what they know their audience likes to see. They literally call it fan service, right? Right? Why do they call it fan service? Because they stuff it into the book, knowing it's something that their fans would like to see. So that was just a nice little moment, seeing like the behind the scenes kind of stuff. Like Volume 1, I think this continues the trend of being really goofy, having consistent humor, where about once per page there'll be a silly expression or Alice making kind of a deadpan comment or not being a good listener, and like silly fashions, bright shiny close-ups of pretty boys' faces. It's all the stuff that makes up shoujo manga that makes it kind of ridiculous, but and it is kind of goofy, but I wouldn't call this a stupid manga. I would call this a manga by a female mangaka who is practiced and knows what works and is cranking out yet another commercial success, at the end of her career after having a very long career. Like she just tops herself by making yet another one. The romance, it's cheeseball, but I actually think this even improved on Volume 1, where I didn't understand half of what was going on in Volume 1, and this explained a few things about like what Momo's deal is, what Yuzu's deal is. That's the other thing, is sometimes there'll be like a really confusing thing, and then you'll read a few chapters ahead, and then, oh, okay, now there's kind of a goofy explanation for it. That kind of works. So, harmless. I don't think they're for parents. I didn't read anything here that was like particularly offensive, unless you don't like boys dressing up as girls or something. You don't think your kids are ready for that. I thought this was entirely charming and very innocent, goofy, silly, but a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it. It kind of is a guilty pleasure, and I'll look for Volume 3. So I think we're going to call it there, because I don't want to repeat too much of what I said about Volume 1, but I think it is good to note that in Volume 2, it carried on what I liked about Volume 1 and built on that. Oh, and the other really cool thing, what's this called? Chekhov's gun. Is it Anton Chekhov? So a Russian playwright. He wrote delightful work about humor and politics and some serious drama. But Chekhov's kind of famous for this idea that if you show the audience a gun, then the audience is going to expect that gun to have been fired by the third act. So don't make a point of like pulling out a gun and showing it to the audience in your script unless you're going to use that gun. And Anonymous Noise has a thing like that, which is that Alice wants to see Momo again. And usually what would happen is, 100 volumes would go by and she would never see Momo. And then finally at the end, then she finally sees Momo, right? Or it's like Lois Lane and Superman. Like when Lois Lane and Superman are dating, there's this will they, won't they get together that lasts 50 years. And then finally they get married and you can finally build something new on that. So what I liked about this was that this didn't make me wait like 30 volumes for them to build on some of these plot points. They built on some of the plot points of why Momo was keeping away from Alice. And that's cool. Momo's a jerk, though. So girls definitely go for, like, the short Bishi boy who chugs milk and is a brilliant composer and makes tributes to you and is actually there for you to support you. Not the tall, handsome boy who is gripped with guilt that he never wants to see you again and is filled with shame and therefore keeps you distant. It's so weird. Anyway, I love you guys. I love my patrons on Patreon, and I will catch you later.